Hi, I'm Steve Logan. I'm a songwriter and rock musician from South Wales. I'm going to talk today about the current state of live music as it's experienced by most musicians. Is it true that grassroots music venues are dying out? The headlines are all about closures. We commonly hear it said that one venue closes about every 2 weeks. In 2023, the Music Venue Trust reported 835 grassroots music venues remaining in the UK after 125 closures. There are now 810. Festivals, having rapidly increased in number, are now declining in number, except for the biggest ones. The usual causes cited for this are the pandemic, rising costs of putting on events or running venues, ticket prices from the consumer's point of view, and redevelopment, which often poses a challenge to people who are trying to keep a venue going and then get a very attractive offer on it from some property developer. Well, this is clearly happening, but there's something about the whole situation which I feel isn't being said. It's not quite true to my own experience. Yesterday, a friend and fellow musician who works in a tribute act told me that a pretty well-established Tina Turner tribute had had to cancel some shows because of poor ticket sales. It started me thinking. It wasn't very long ago that some of the club venues I've played, places with a maximum capacity of about 300, were booking more tributes because they could be relied on to pull in punters. Now that's not so simply the case. Tribute bands remain popular, but the distribution of opportunities is uneven. I remember a conversation I had a while back with someone running a major tribute venue just outside London. He said that a superb Police tribute got virtually no crowd. I asked him about Free, because I played for a long time in a tribute to Free, called Free Again. Free, he thought, was a bit niche. Alt-rock tributes to The Cure or Echo and Bunnymen might also be a bit narrow in appeal, I'd guess. Some classic rock tributes, such as T-Rex and various Led Zeppelin tributes, are still in business, as is the Thin Lizzy tribute, Limehouse Lizzy, partly because the person running it has worked so very, very hard to promote it. Look at the listings for your local larger touring venue. In Cambridge, that would be somewhere like the Corn Exchange. You'll regularly see tributes to the Beatles, Queen, Fleetwood Mac, and Pink Floyd. But smaller bands, who nonetheless have got tributes to them, don't figure so frequently. So the tribute scene is thriving or not, depending on who the tribute is to. At the same time, the number of tribute gigs being cancelled owing to poor ticket sales, like the Tina Turner one I mentioned, that's increasing. So if you take the total tribute scene, it looks like it's in a bit of a decline. When it comes to original music, the main focus is on superstar spectaculars. If Taylor Swift or even Coldplay announced that they were doing some totally untheatrical gigs, no elaborate rigs, cranes, lighting effects and costume changes, it's likely that the numbers attending would gradually go down. Oasis, in their recent reunion gig in Cardiff, were able to dispense with elaborate stage effects, but their situation in popular culture is pretty much unique. And they're not trying to gig every week. For these big shows, ticket prices are high. Organisers would explain that it's to cover costs. But the effect is that people don't expect to go to them that often. If it's, say, 150 quid for a ticket, and you have to travel and maybe pay for overnight accommodation, such gigs are a major financial outlay. Lower profile but still established acts like Paul Heaton of the Beautiful South or even Pearl Jam can charge lower prices, but most musicians aren't at that level. Organisers will still complain that their profits are marginal or non-existent. Lower down still, you have the majority of musicians, people who are emerging or who've reached the level that they're probably going to stay at. And this is where varying degrees of crunch will be really felt. It's not only that venues are closing down, but the work that you have to do as an independent musician, if you're unsigned, in order to promote your event is considerable. Not all the venues that you play at will be completely a pleasure to play. And on top of that, even your dedicated fans may not want to travel to them, a factor which affects even famous acts whose audiences are globally dispersed. And sometimes people who are mildly interested won't want to be in an uncomfortable, possibly ill-ventilated venue with touch-and-go sound engineering. And here I come to the almost unsayable possibility. Maybe the era of burgeoning grassroots music venues is either coming to an end or it's going through a crucial phase of change. Similar things have happened before. Last year, I did a gig at the Panopticon in Glasgow. This claims to be the oldest surviving music hall in the UK. There are only 3 or 4 of these music halls left in their original form. Some have been adapted to other kinds of venue. But those few are a tiny part of the scores of music halls that came into existence around 1850. By 1865, in London alone, there were 32 music halls seating between 500 and 5,000 people, plus an unknown but large number of smaller venues. By 1878, there were 78 large music halls in the metropolis, as well as 300 smaller venues. It might have looked as though that was going to go on forever, but some big cultural changes had started happening. Between the wars, that's to say 1918 to 1939, cinema improved. Radio drama took off at home. The gramophone got cheaper and it spread awareness of jazz and swing and big band music. And then in the mid-1950s, as we all probably know, rock and roll exploded into the cultural consciousness. At the same time, black and white TV had reached, for the first time, 50% of UK homes. The age of the music hall was dead. John Osborne, the playwright, was one of many who lamented this pretty seismic change. In The Entertainer, he writes, "The music hall is dying, and with it, a significant part of England." Not just England, I would add. Some of the heart of England has gone, something that once belonged to everyone, for this was truly a folk art. Still, the music hall went. Is there any similarity between this and the situation of grassroots music venues in the UK now? Like the music halls, they became very numerous and then recently have started to shut. Like the music halls, they are loved or were loved by performers and people who attended there local one. But like the music halls, contemporary grassroots venues exist within a changing culture. So what's changed? Well, the digital revolution has happened. Let me just mention 4 things. First, YouTube started in 2005. You can see innumerable videos of your favourite artists for free. Compare this with the pre-digital era, where if you saw recorded artists at all, it was either in the newspapers or via brief TV appearances. And if you wanted to see them play live and extensively, you had to go to a gig. Second, Netflix became a streaming service in 2007. Imagine you've had a hard week's work. You've got a family outing planned for tomorrow. Do you want to go to a venue which you don't greatly like and pay for a ticket to see a band you're vaguely curious about, or do you want to watch Netflix? Musicians may not like the thought that potential members of their audience are thinking like this, but I ask you to look at your own experience. Does this happen or not? Third, social media. Facebook, which wasn't the beginning of social media, but was the beginning as far as most people are concerned, was launched in 2004. This made it possible to connect directly with musicians and for musicians to connect directly with their fans. This, as I'm very happy to say, is great in all sorts of ways. But I wonder whether it hasn't taken a bit of mystique out of the process of finding out about your favourite artists. Significantly, you still can't connect with most big name artists via their DMs. So their mystique is more intact, and that intensifies the public sense of a separation between musicians that they know and musicians that they admire from a distance. Fourth, streaming. Spotify, which again wasn't quite the beginning, launched in 2008. Now you can listen to anything by anyone, anywhere, and if you're willing to put up with adverts, it's free. So all these events happened in the 2000s, give or take, that's about 20 years ago. Maybe their full effect on the current live music scene is now beginning to be felt. So what could happen? When the music halls closed, acting and singing didn't die with them. They found new forms and new venues. I wonder if this isn't the current situation. Let me put forward some possibilities, very tentatively, because of course I've got no idea what's going to happen. First, grassroots live music venues might unexpectedly revive. That could happen. At the end of Shakespeare's life, the theatre as he'd known it became gentrified. It survived, but not in its original form. If Shakespeare was alive now, incidentally, my guess is that he'd be writing for EastEnders or for Netflix. There may be some changes which happen that could make small music venues more viable. One of these is actually AI, since the increasing presence of bot bands could stimulate a desire for genuine performances which you know are genuine because you can see the musicians close up and you can see what equipment they're using. And that's perhaps analogous to the way that streaming has provoked something of a revival in vinyl sales. The second possibility is that venues might become more attractive to what you could call uncommitted fans. Pubs are closing. I performed in a lot of them, and I know that not all music fans want to go to them. Some smaller venues are a joy to play at and visit. What if venues started really diversifying, maybe like restaurants or cafes, so that people who wanted to listen to music in a more congenial environment could be tempted out? People who want a vibe like, say, the Jericho Tavern in Oxford would have places to go, as would people who wanted something more like Ronnie Scott's or the once superb CB1 folk venue in Cambridge, to mention just 3 kinds of venue. But what I've got in mind is venues that would be presented to the public in the hope of making them feel comfortable, such as you'd have to do if you were, let's say, working in any branch of hospitality. The third thing is, and I suppose this is a possibility that interests me particularly, new forms of live performance could be developed. It's already possible to put a band in an as live environment, say a really good rehearsal room with space, a stage, decent lighting, PA, backline, and a sound engineer. You could run a gig from a setting like that and stream it. You can already do that. The trouble is, speaking as a performer, you don't get the stimulus of interacting with a live audience. But what if the hologramic methods used for some big music shows were turned around, and instead of having hologram performers in front of a real audience, you had real bands in front of a convincing virtual representation of the actual people watching your live stream? It's a bizarre idea, I know, but speculations like this might be part of finding solutions to what looks like, at the moment, a real problem. None of what I've said applies without qualification to signed bands who are on a tour. Their gigs will be in well-maintained venues. They will have been carefully promoted, and both the audiences and the musicians in general will be well looked after. That's one of the reasons why being signed still remains an attractive possibility to many musicians. The current music industry, as a Guardian article recently put it, is great for 1% of musicians. For a further group, emerging but professionally promoted, it's pretty good. For the rest, and that's most people, it's a bit of a struggle. Imagine if Noel Gallagher hadn't got signed. Would he still be playing in pubs? I'd love to hear your thoughts. See you next time.